3 weeks after we moved onto the farm. The son of the man who had sold it to me called late at night. "I forgot to disconnect one camera," Daniel said. His voice was shaking. "I saw what your son and your wife are planning to do to you. Do not say anything to either of them. Come alone." I was standing in my basement workshop when he said it. 10 feet away, on the corner of my workbench, sat the cup of chamomile tea my wife had brought down with her own hands. I did not drink it. My name is Walter Kowalski. I was 72 years old then, a retired mechanical engineer who had spent 31 years building systems that could not afford to fail. Machines had always comforted me because they behaved according to pressure, tolerance, heat, and force. When something broke, there was a reason. You found it, documented it, and repaired what could still be repaired. Families were not so generous. The workshop smelled of motor oil, raw metal, and cedar shavings from the shelves I had begun building the week before. Eleanor had carried the tea downstairs 40 minutes earlier, set it beside my drawings, and told me not to stay up too late because my back would punish me in the morning. I had laughed. She had kissed the top of my head and gone upstairs. We had been married 45 years. I picked up the mug. It was still warm. Then I walked to the utility shelf, found an empty paint can, and poured every drop into it. I rinsed the mug twice, dried it, and returned it to the exact place where Eleanor had left it. Same angle. Same distance from the edge. 45 years had taught me that my wife noticed small changes. I was not going to give her one. Upstairs, she was reading in bed beneath the lamp on her side. She looked up and gave me the small smile I had received for most of my adult life, the smile that meant she was glad I had returned even when I had only come from the next room. "You were down there a long time," she said. "Lost an hour reorganizing the tool cabinet. The cabinet will still be a mess tomorrow." I changed and lay beside her. Within minutes, her breathing settled. In sleep, her hand often drifted toward the center of the mattress, never searching, only moving in my direction as if her body remembered where I belonged. That night, her fingers reached my forearm. I did not pull away. I stared at the ceiling and treated the information like a failed machine. Daniel had said the old camera faced our living room. It had recorded our son Brandon, our daughter Melissa, and Eleanor discussing something that frightened him enough to call a man he barely knew after midnight. If I confronted them, they would deny everything and destroy whatever evidence remained. I needed to see the footage. I needed copies. I needed legal protection. Most of all, I needed them to believe I knew nothing. Morning came slowly over the orange grove. I told Eleanor I was driving into town for garden supplies. She stood at the kitchen counter in her robe, drinking coffee and watching sunlight move across the trees. "This early?" she asked. "The hardware store opens at 7:30. I want the good potting soil before the weekend crowd." She asked me to buy an extra bag. I kissed her cheek, walked to my truck, and did not look back. Daniel lived 40 minutes north in a second-floor apartment above a dry cleaner. He was waiting on the stairs when I arrived, lean, serious, and pale from lack of sleep. Inside, the table was clear except for a laptop and 2 untouched mugs of coffee. "My father sold you that farm because he believed in what you were building," he said. "He told me you reminded him of himself and my mother when they first moved there." I almost deleted the footage. Then I thought about what he would have done. He turned the screen toward me. The timestamp read 11:32 the previous night. Brandon entered our living room first and threw a thick envelope onto the coffee table. Melissa followed and locked the door. Eleanor came from the kitchen carrying a dish towel. "Mom," Brandon said, pressing both hands against the papers, "I owe $1.2 million. These people are not patient. They will take everything I have and then come looking for more. Dad will not help me. You know what he will say." Eleanor told him to slow down. Instead, he removed a small glass bottle from his jacket. It had no label. "A pharmacist I know gave me this," he said. 3 drops in his tea every night. After 2 weeks, he will be confused, weak, and unable to argue with the page in front of him. We bring the lawyer. He signs the power of attorney and the transfer. The farm covers the debt." Eleanor lifted both hands to her mouth. Melissa stepped closer. "Dad is 72. He will not manage the property forever. We are only bringing the inheritance forward." Eleanor looked at the bottle, then at our wedding photograph on the wall. "Your father will never forgive me," she whispered. "He will never know," Brandon answered. My wife reached out and took the bottle. The footage continued, but something inside me stopped moving. Not numbness. Silence. The kind of silence left when the last working part in a machine finally ceases. Daniel closed the laptop. "I am sorry," he said. "Do not apologize for showing me the truth." He slid a USB drive across the table. Every recording is there. The original file, the timestamp, the camera information. Everything. I put it in my shirt pocket and buttoned the pocket closed. On the way home, I stopped at the hardware store. I bought 2 bags of potting soil, garden stakes, and a packet of chamomile seeds because a believable lie requires details. When I turned onto a gravel drive, the farmhouse looked exactly as it had the day before: red roof, white porch rails, 2 orderly rows of orange trees, and the eucalyptus wreath Eleanor had hung on the front door within 48 hours of moving in. She was making lunch when I entered. Her eyes brightened when she saw me. That small reaction hurt more than the video. "Find what you needed?" she asked. "And more." I held up the chamomile seeds. "Thought I would plant these by the south fence." She smiled. "You and your projects." While washing my hands, I looked through the window at the grove and wrote 3 rules in my mind. First, I would not confront anyone until the facts made denial useless. Second, I would give them the old man they expected to see: slower, forgetful, uncertain, and increasingly dependent. Third, I would never consume anything they gave me without controlling it first. Eleanor brought tea to my workshop at 9 every evening. Before dawn each morning, I began brewing a clean cup in an identical blue mug and locking it inside the deep drawer beneath my bench. When she arrived with the prepared tea, I would drop a pencil, a screw, or my glasses near her feet. While she bent to retrieve it, I switched the mugs. I practiced the motion until it took less than 3 seconds. The first night, she carried the tea downstairs and straightened the papers beside it. "Drink it while it is warm," she said. I let a pencil roll beneath the tool cabinet. She sighed and bent to reach it. My right hand placed the clean mug on the bench while my left moved hers into the lock drawer. When she gave me the pencil, I made my hand tremble. "These old fingers," I said. Her expression lived somewhere between guilt and pity. "Get some sleep tonight." "I will." After she left, I sat alone with the cup she had intended me to drink. I wanted to send it to a laboratory immediately, but Martin would later advise me to preserve the chain of evidence before moving anything. So I sealed the mug inside a clean container, marked the time, and placed it in the locked cabinet. Then I drank my safety and began planning how to survive my own family without allowing them to know they had become my enemy. 2 days later, I watched a silver sedan stop beside the barn. A well-dressed man handed Brandon a folder and waited while he read the first page. Brandon braced one hand against the car, spoke rapidly, and watched the sedan disappear down the drive. My son's dad had a face now. A clean suit. A silent car. No handshake. That afternoon, I called our neighbor Ray. He was 68, a retired carpenter who had introduced himself by bringing apricot preserves and informing me that 3 shingles on my barn roof would not survive winter. He believed useful information was more polite than small talk. "I need a ride to Fresno tomorrow morning," I said. "I also need you not to mention it to Eleanor." A pause. "You all right?" "I will be." 6:30? Perfect. He asked nothing else. My attorney, Martin Gale, had served with me in the Army Reserve before becoming a property lawyer. His office was serious without being grand. I placed the USB drive on his desk and told him everything: the bottle, the debt, the planned power of attorney, the farm transfer, and the man in the silver sedan. Martin watched the recording twice. "We can place the farm, your accounts, your patent income, and the mineral rights into an irrevocable protective trust," he said. "Temporary notices can block any transfer immediately. Once the trust is recorded, no power of attorney they obtain can touch those assets without the trustee's approval and a court order." "How long?" "Up to 2 weeks for full recording. 48 hours for emergency protections. Start today." He studied me. "Once this begins, there is no quiet ending." "There stopped being a quiet ending when my wife took the bottle." Martin nodded and opened a new file. On the drive home, Ray asked only one question. "You good?" "Getting there." He started the truck, and we drove through the morning light while I thought about locked doors and whether any legal structure could protect a man from the knowledge that his own family wanted him removed from his life. Sunday morning, while looking for packing tape, I opened Eleanor's nightstand and found a 3-page application to Fresno Care and Rehabilitation Center. My name, birth date, social security number, and medical history had been completed in her handwriting. Boxes were checked beside memory loss, confusion, and impaired daily functioning. Under anticipated admission, someone else had written, "as soon as possible." The facility was 41 miles away. I photographed every page, returned the application behind her paperback and hand lotion, and sat on the edge of our bed listening to her talk softly to the tomato seedlings outside. She encouraged plants the same way she had encouraged our children when they were small. "You are doing so well," she murmured through the open window. "Just a little more sun." That was when I understood the full design. Selling the farm was not enough. As long as I remained on the property, legally competent and able to call Martin, I was an obstacle. They planned to manufacture my decline, obtain my signature, and place me somewhere distant before I could challenge the transfer. I texted Martin 3 words: "Found more evidence." Then I went downstairs, showed Eleanor the packing tape, and agreed when she suggested breakfast in town. I smiled, opened her car door, and discussed pancakes while my name waited inside a memory care application upstairs. The following morning, Brandon announced that a community health nurse would visit for a routine wellness assessment. "I signed you up weeks ago," he said. "It will give us a baseline." Eleanor stood at the stove. Her spoon stopped moving for half a second. "That was thoughtful," I said. Patricia Hale arrived at 10 in a county sedan, carrying a medical bag and a clipboard. She had close-cropped silver hair and the steady movements of someone who had spent years observing people who hoped not to be observed. Brandon sat nearby while she checked my blood pressure and asked cognitive questions. I delayed simple answers, lost my place while counting backward, and stared at her shoulder instead of her eyes. I drew a clock correctly, then smeared part of it with my thumb before handing it over. I performed just poorly enough to concern Brandon but not poorly enough to create a genuine emergency. At the end, Patricia asked to speak with me privately. Brandon went to the kitchen and stopped where he could listen. Patricia leaned toward me. "Your blood pressure is 118/74. Your recall is excellent. You drew the clock perfectly before altering it. I have done this work for 22 years, Mr. Kowalski. I know the difference between a man who is losing his mind and a man who is protecting something. I met her eyes for the first time. I need you to document exactly what happened here. I document everything. I may need you to remember it later. That is why records exist. She filed a report confirming that I showed no clinical evidence of cognitive impairment. Brandon believed the appointment had helped him. After she left, I deliberately spilled coffee on the windowsill and fumbled with the cloth while cleaning it. Relief softened his face. He thought he had bought a witness. Instead, he had delivered one to me. During the following week, the performance spread beyond the house. Brandon walked two real estate agents along the property line while they photographed the barn, the grove, and the southern slope. At dinner, he called them college friends interested in country life. Ray later identified them as agricultural brokers from Fresno. They had asked him about water rights, mineral rights, and neighboring land values. When he told them I had moved in 3 weeks earlier and appeared determined to stay, they stopped smiling. Melissa began preparing the community for my decline. One afternoon she rearranged the shelf beside the fireplace, moving Eleanor's pottery and family photographs aside. In the center, she placed my retirement portrait beside an unlit votive candle. Then she invited a neighbor inside. I stood unseen in the hallway while Melissa explained that I struggled to recognize familiar faces but found comfort in seeing a younger photograph of myself. "We are considering care options," she said in a lowered voice. "Some days are very difficult." My daughter had created a memorial display for a man standing 12 feet behind her, listening to every word. I shuffled into the room holding the television remote as though I did not know its purpose. "Did someone move my things?" I asked. Melissa's eyes widened, then settled into practiced tenderness. "Just tidying, Dad. Doesn't it look nice?" I sat heavily and stared at the screen while she and the neighbor discussed my supposed decline. After the visitor left, I returned the remote to the chair with a steady hand and looked at the unlit candle. It bothered me because it was waiting. Brandon's most calculated move came at dinner 2 nights later. Eleanor had made pot roast, the meal she prepared when someone needed comfort. Brandon placed his phone face up beside his plate, called my 9-year-old grandson Tyler, and handed me the screen. Tyler wore rocket ship pajamas. Behind him hung a poster of the solar system. His smile appeared the moment he saw me, but worry quickly replaced it. "Grandpa, Dad said if you do not sign the farm papers, our family might not have enough money. He said things could get really hard. Are you going to be okay?" He glanced below the camera at a page someone had given him. Melissa stared at her plate. Eleanor looked through the dark window. Brandon watched me with the attention of a man waiting for a machine to produce the result he had programmed. Tyler did not understand power of attorney, debt, or property transfer. He only understood that adults he trusted had given him words and said those words might save his family. I made my voice gentle. "Listen carefully, Tyler. Everything will be fine. Your grandfather is handling the grown-up problems. Grown-ups should never place those problems on 9-year-olds. Do you understand?" He nodded uncertainly. "Good. Now tell me about your science project." His real smile returned. He had earned an A- on the solar system. We talked about school, soccer, and his friend's new dog until the script disappeared from his lap. When the call ended, nobody at the table ate. Later, I sat in the living room listening to Eleanor wash dishes. For 10 minutes, I allowed myself to feel everything: the child used as leverage, the candle beside my photograph, the application 41 miles away, and my wife's silence. Then I put the grief away again. Patience was not calmness. It was pain given an appointment for later. That night, Eleanor waited until she believed I was asleep. Then she left the bed, knelt beside me, and took my hand. Her forehead rested against my knuckles. "Walter," she whispered, "I know you cannot understand me the way you used to, but I need to say this. I have known what I am doing is wrong from the moment I accepted that bottle. I have not stopped knowing it for a single hour." Her tears fell warm against my hand. "You spent 45 years caring for us. You worked until your hands bled. I am doing this because Brandon is my son and I cannot watch him lose everything, even though destroying you to save him makes me the worst thing I have ever been." She struggled for breath. "When it is over, I will spend whatever life I have left trying to make it right. I need you to know I have not stopped loving you. Not even while doing this." She returned to bed and eventually slept. I remained awake with her tears drying on my skin. Her confession did not absolve her. It did something more painful. It proved she understood exactly what she had chosen. 3 days remained before Martin expected the trust to be recorded. I could survive 3 days. At dawn on Sunday, Ray drove me back to Fresno. Martin met us in a parking structure with a folder and 2 coffees. He spread the documents across the center console. "The trust recorded faster than expected," he said. "The farm, mineral rights, patent income, savings, and investments are protected. I am the trustee. No one can transfer, mortgage, or encumber those assets without my approval and a court order. Any power of attorney they obtain is useless against the trust." The county stamp showed the precise time the door had locked behind my family's plan. Martin handed me a copy. There is also the criminal matter. Daniel's footage, the preserved tea, Patricia's report, the care facility application, the brokers, and communications we obtained from Brandon's lender establish a pattern of elder abuse and attempted fraud. The sheriff's department is prepared to act. "When?" "When you say." I thought about Tyler, Melissa's candle, and Eleanor crying beside the bed. "Not yet." Martin's expression hardened. "Why?" "I want them to take the last step. I want the documents on the table and their intentions spoken plainly. Then there will be no story about misunderstanding." He studied me, then nodded. 2 days. After that, I act whether you are emotionally ready or not." "Agreed." Ray drove us home through lifting fog. At the end of my drive, he kept the engine running and looked toward the farmhouse. "You doing all right?" "Ask me Wednesday." He nodded once. Inside, Eleanor was beginning coffee. Brandon and Melissa were asleep, unaware that the farm they planned to take had already moved beyond their reach. 2 days remained. Monday morning, Brandon came into the workshop without knocking. He had stopped treating the room as mine. He ran one hand along the bench and asked how I was feeling. "Pretty good," I said. "A little tired." "We should finish the property papers tonight. Just family, a notary, nothing stressful. Once it is done, you will not have to worry about bills or decisions anymore." I let my gaze drift toward the window as if holding the thought required effort. "Tonight?" "No rush," he said with the voice of a man in considerable rush. "But tonight would be best." "All right." Relief passed through his face before he could hide it. After he left, I texted Martin, "Tonight." His answer arrived within a minute, 7. "I will bring an officer." For the next 8 hours, I sanded the same shelf-board. Waiting became its own form of labor. The danger was not in the confrontation. It was in the ordinary hours before it, when I had to remain the uncertain old man they expected while the real man sat beneath the performance and counted breaths. Eleanor served roast chicken on the good blue placemats. A candle burned at the center of the table. Brandon opened wine without asking and discussed removing a wall to bring more light into the dining room. Melissa described renovation programs and spoke about supporting load-bearing structures. They were redesigning my house before owning it. After dinner, Brandon cleared the plates, Melissa placed a folder on the sideboard, and a notary canceled by telephone. The cancellation was real. The tension in Brandon's face was not. He still opened the documents and slid the signature page toward me. "Just sign here, Dad. We can have the witness completed tomorrow." The clock showed 6:58. I picked up the pen with a trembling hand. The doorbell rang. Everyone froze. I stood, and for the first time in 2 weeks, my hand became completely steady. The person outside was not Martin. It was a delivery driver carrying garden seeds Eleanor had ordered, chamomile and lavender for the south fence. I signed for the package, returned to the table, and resumed the tremor. Brandon laughed too loudly and poured more wine. For 40 minutes he tried to lead the conversation back to the papers, but Melissa refused to proceed without the notary. Martin waited down the road until I texted him to stand down. The delay made Brandon more dangerous. Tuesday morning, his phone rang repeatedly. He paced the kitchen, spoke in low urgent bursts, and arranged for the notary to come that afternoon. I sent Martin one word, "Today." His reply said he and Officer Reyes would be nearby. I went to the workshop and waited. 2 hours later, an argument began above me. Brandon's voice was fast and pressured. Eleanor's voice remained low until she said one clear word. "No." A cabinet opened. Glass struck the counter. Then I heard the metal carafe Eleanor filled for my workshop every morning. I climbed the stairs quickly. The kitchen was bright with midday sun. Eleanor stood against the counter, both hands raised, while Brandon held the carafe in one hand and a larger dark bottle in the other. Part of a pharmacy label had been removed. "This will work faster," he said. "It will make him cooperative for a few hours. That is all we need." "That is not what you gave me before," Eleanor said. "I do not know what that is." "It does not matter. It could stop his heart. At his age, with his blood pressure." "He is 72, Brandon snapped. "He has had a good life. I need you to let me do this." The room became silent. He had not seen me in the doorway. Eleanor did. Her face changed. For 2 weeks she had been drowning inside her own decision. In that moment, she realized she was close enough to shore to choose a direction. She crossed the kitchen and struck the carafe with both hands. It spun from Brandon's grip, hit the hardwood, and burst open. Liquid spread across the floor. Where it touched the finish, the wood turned pale and pitted. Brandon stared at the stain, then seized Eleanor's arm. "You destroyed everything," he said. "They are going to take everything I have because of you." I stepped forward and closed my hand around his wrist. 31 years of mechanical work had taught me exactly how much pressure a joint could tolerate. "Let go of your mother." He turned toward me. His expression moved backward through 2 weeks of trembling hands, misplaced glasses, uncertain answers, and stooped shoulders. He tried to locate the moment the weakness had ended. There was no single moment. That was the design. He released her. I straightened to my full height. "Dad?" he whispered. "Do not." I led Eleanor into the living room. Melissa was waiting beside a gray-suited lawyer whose open briefcase contained a property transfer deed, a refinancing agreement, and a broad power of attorney disguised by the word limited. "You can close that case," I told him. He looked at Brandon. Brandon followed us, shaking now without performance. "If you do not sign today, I lose everything," he said. "My car, my savings, my business, all of it. I handle this badly, But I am your son. I am begging you to help me." I looked at the face I had watched enter the world, learn to read, ride a bicycle, and lose at chess. Somewhere across 43 years, it had become the face of a stranger. "I heard you in the kitchen," I said. "You told your mother I was 72 and had lived a good life. You said it as if my past was permission to erase my future." His jaw tightened. "I paid for your education, your sister's education, cars, rent, and the down payment on your first apartment. I did those things because you were my children. You decided that because I had already given so much, the remainder belonged to you too." I walked to the television and changed the input. 3 camera feeds appeared. Ray had installed the system after my first meeting with Martin. One view covered the living room. Another showed the kitchen from above the refrigerator. A third faced the hallway and workshop entrance. The kitchen recording replayed Brandon holding the bottle, Eleanor refusing, the carafe striking the floor, and his hand closing around her arm. Melissa stood. "You recorded us?" "I recorded criminal activity inside my own home after receiving evidence that my family intended to drug me and steal my property. Martin can explain admissibility." The gray-suited lawyer closed his briefcase. Brandon watched himself on the screen. "You knew," he said. "From the night Daniel called. From the moment I poured the first cup of tea into a paint can." Eleanor looked at me. Her hand remained wrapped around the arm Brandon had squeezed. The doorbell rang. This time, Martin stood outside with Officer Diana Reyes. Martin entered, placed his folder on top of Brandon's papers, and introduced himself as my attorney and trustee. "As of 4:47 on October 16, he said, "Walter Kowalski's farm, mineral rights, patent income, accounts, and investments were transferred into an irrevocable protective trust. No document presented here can transfer, mortgage, or control those assets. Your papers were void before you printed them." The other lawyer stood immediately. "I was not informed of a trust," he said. "You were not informed of much," Martin answered. The lawyer left without looking at Brandon. Martin produced Patricia Hale's report. It confirmed excellent blood pressure, recall in the upper range for my age, and no evidence of dementia or diminished capacity. Then he displayed Daniel's original footage, photographs of the care facility application, laboratory analysis of the preserved tea, messages between Brandon and his lender, and the new recording from the kitchen. Officer Reyes stepped forward and read Brandon his rights on charges connected to elder abuse, attempted fraud, conspiracy, and the substance intended for the carafe. "This is insane," he said. "I was trying to save this family." "Please keep your hands visible," she replied. His fight disappeared. Then he looked at Eleanor and pointed at her. "She did it. She put the drops in his tea. I told her not to use too much. This morning was her idea. I was not even in the kitchen." The accusation was so immediate that nobody spoke. Eleanor looked at the son she had tried to save by sacrificing her husband. Then she laughed. It was not amusement. It was the sound of 45 years of marriage, 4 decades of motherhood, and 2 weeks of guilt breaking open at once. She laughed until her shoulders shook, wiped her eyes, and stared at Brandon with a stillness I had never seen before. She did not defend herself. The cameras did that. Officer Reyes turned to Melissa and read her rights as well. Melissa sat on the sofa as if her legs had stopped obeying her. The living room filled with the quiet language of procedure and the metallic click of handcuffs. I watched my children walk toward the front door. I thought about tuition payments, birthdays, first apartments, Tyler's rocket ship pajamas, and every ordinary act of fatherhood they had reclassified as evidence that I would eventually give them everything. Martin stood beside me. "It is done," he said. "No," I answered. "The legal part has begun." Outside, evening settled over the orange grove. The trees remained where they had always been, rooted in rows, holding fruit that had not yet ripened. The officers led Brandon and Melissa away. The door closed. Eleanor stood near the fireplace beside the photograph and unlit candle Melissa had arranged for my decline. I did not look at her yet. Some events require silence before the next consequence can be named. Martin stayed after the officers left. We sat at the kitchen table where Eleanor had served thousands of meals, paid bills, discussed report cards, and planned holidays. The pale stain from the spilled carafe crossed the hardwood beside us. Eleanor held a cup of tea she had made for herself. She had not spoken since her laughter in the living room. Martin explained that Brandon and Melissa were named in the criminal complaint. Eleanor was not. Her eyes moved to me. Her participation is documented, Martin said, but Walter asked that the complaint focus on the children's planning, financial communications, procurement of the substances, and attempt to force the transfer. The final decision belongs to prosecutors, but his statement matters. After he left, Eleanor and I remained across from each other. "You did not put my name on it," she said. "No." "Why?" The answer contained 45 years, her confession in the dark, and the carafe striking the floor. "Because you stopped." "That is all?" "That is everything still available to us." She closed her eyes. I had not protected her because she was innocent. I had protected the distinction between a person's worst choice and the final choice she made before the damage became irreversible. Whether that distinction would matter to our marriage was another question. Eleanor rinsed her tea, went upstairs, and closed the bedroom door. I sat alone until after midnight. Then I turned on the kitchen light because darkness had begun to feel like a decision rather than a condition. I made coffee and listened to the old house settle. When I finally went upstairs, Eleanor lay awake on her side. Neither of us reached toward the center of the mattress. At dawn, I found her sitting on the edge of the bed beside two open suitcases. She did not look at me. I dressed in the spare room and gave her the space to pack. By sunrise, the suitcases stood near the front door. Eleanor wore her coat and had arranged her hair carefully, as she always did when leaving for something important. I stood at the living room window looking across the grove. Her footsteps stopped behind me. "I am not asking you to forgive me," she said. "I knew what I was doing every day. I know it now, and I will know it for whatever time I have left. Leaving is the right thing. I only need you to understand that I understand." I kept my eyes on the trees. "I kept your name out because you stopped when it mattered most. But I cannot remove you from what you already know you did. Nobody can carry another person out of that truth." She breathed slowly. "I am releasing you, Eleanor. Go be Brandon's mother in whatever way you still can. Go learn why saving him became worth destroying us. But from this day forward, you are no longer my wife, and Brandon and Melissa are no longer entitled to call themselves my children as though the word erases their choices." My voice remained calm. "That is not anger. It is a measurement. We ended the night you accepted the bottle." The room was silent. "I know," she said. She lifted the suitcases, opened the front door, and walked across the porch. The latch closed with a small ordinary sound. I stood at the window until her car disappeared beyond the trees. 45 years can feel endless while you are living them and painfully brief when you reach the far side and look back. The eucalyptus wreath she had hung still rested on the door. Her tomato seedlings still waited for water. Her paperback remained on the nightstand. The house was mine, but ownership sounded different in an empty room. The legal proceedings lasted more than a year. Brandon's debt was not merely a failed investment. Investigators found fraudulent borrowing, forged statements, and commitments secured against property he did not own. The larger bottle had been obtained through an illegal prescription arrangement. He eventually pleaded guilty to several financial and elder abuse charges after the recordings and laboratory results made denial impossible. Melissa's role was different but not small. She had contacted real estate agents, helped prepare the false story of my decline, arranged the memory care application, and participated in the attempted transfer. She cooperated after her arrest, surrendered messages, and admitted that she had turned Tyler into leverage. Her sentence was lighter than Brandon's, but the court prohibited her from managing my property or finances and required restitution and supervised contact with her son during the early months of the case. Tyler stayed with his mother's sister while the adults answered for what they had done. I saw him after the first hearing. He ran across the courthouse hallway and wrapped both arms around me. "Did I make everything worse?" he asked. "No. But Dad told me to ask about the papers. You were 9. Adults gave you a burden that did not belong to you. Returning it is not betrayal." He cried against my coat. I held him until he was ready to let go, then asked about the solar system. He told me he still believed Pluto deserved another hearing. Patricia testified that I had shown no cognitive decline. Daniel authenticated the original camera files. Ray described the brokers and later produced invoices for the replacement security system. Martin presented the trust, the care application, the T evidence, and Brandon's financial messages. Eleanor testified too. She did not ask for mercy for herself. She described accepting the bottle, preparing the tea, and believing love for her son justified something she knew was wrong. Then she described the larger bottle, the carafe, and Brandon's words about my having lived long enough. When the prosecutor asked why she changed her mind, she said, "I did not change my mind. I finally obeyed the part of it that had been telling me no from the beginning." After her testimony, she approached me in the courthouse corridor. "I am sorry," she said. "I know. I do not expect that to repair anything." "It will not." She nodded. That was the entire conversation. The farm remained protected inside the trust. Martin continued as trustee, and I added independent conditions for any future sale or transfer. No relative could assume control merely by claiming concern. Any finding of incapacity would require 2 independent examinations and court review. I had spent my life protecting machines against predictable failure. I should have given my own future the same respect earlier. The first months alone were difficult in ways the courtroom could not address. There was no victory in waking to one coffee cup. No justice in hearing only my footsteps upstairs. I had kept the farm and lost the story I believed about my family. The law could freeze accounts, reject signatures, preserve evidence, and punish crimes. It could not restore the simple confidence that the person carrying tea into your workshop meant only kindness. Ray helped me repair the barn roof. He arrived with tools, apricot preserves, and no questions. We replaced the 3 loose shingles he had identified on his first visit. "You were right about these," I said. "I usually am about roofs." "Anything else?" "Plenty. But you did not ask." That was Ray. Daniel visited during the orange harvest. He still carried guilt for not discovering the connected camera sooner. "You called when you knew," I told him. "That is the only time a person can act." Together, we picked fruit from the first row. I had never managed an orchard. The previous owners left notes about irrigation, pruning, frost, and timing. Learning the grove gave my days structure. Trees required patience without deception. They did not pretend to be ready before they were. I planted the chamomile seeds along the south fence. For weeks, I considered throwing them away. Then I decided Eleanor did not own the plant and Brandon did not own the tea. Allowing their betrayal to corrupt every ordinary thing would give them more of my life than the court ever could. When the first flowers opened, I brewed a cup myself. I used the same blue ceramic mug. The tea tasted clean, mild, and exactly like chamomile. I carried it to the living room and sat beside the window. The antique clock still hung on the wall with the forgotten camera hidden in its carved wooden detail. Daniel had offered to remove it. I told him to leave it. I did not want to live under surveillance, but I wanted to remember the difference between watching and seeing. For years, I had watched my family without seeing the pressure changing them. Brandon's business failures became secrecy. Melissa's fear became entitlement. Eleanor's devotion to her children lost every boundary that had once made it love rather than surrender. I had also failed to see how often I solved problems with money and called the solution parenting. Perhaps my children learned that a crisis ended when their father paid. When I finally refused, they treated refusal as malfunction. That understanding did not excuse them. It only made the ruins accurate. Eleanor moved into a small apartment in Fresno. She wrote to me twice during the first year. The first letter explained too much. The second contained 4 sentences. I loved you while I betrayed you. That does not make the betrayal smaller. I chose fear over loyalty and called it motherhood. I am learning to live without asking you to carry the cost. I kept the letter but did not answer. Some apologies deserve acknowledgement without receiving excess. Melissa later sent a statement accepting responsibility. She did not ask for the farm, money, or forgiveness. She said Tyler was in counseling and that she had told him the script was her failure, not his. I allowed Martin to arrange limited visits between Tyler and me without requiring contact with her. Brandon wrote from prison. His letter said desperation had changed him and that a father should understand what a man will do to protect his family. I returned it unopened after Martin confirmed it contained no legal material. A man who uses family as a reason to destroy family has not yet understood the word. 3 years later, the orange grove produced its strongest harvest in a decade. Ray and I hired seasonal workers, donated part of the crop to a food bank, and sold the rest through a local cooperative. Tyler, now 12, spent a weekend helping us sort fruit. He held up an orange with a scar across the peel. Is this one bad? I cut it open. The fruit inside was bright and sweet. Damaged on the surface, I said. Still useful. He considered that. Is that supposed to be about people? No. Sometimes an orange is allowed to be an orange. He left and placed it in the good crate. That evening, we sat on the porch while the sun lowered beyond the grove. Tyler asked whether I missed Eleanor. Yes. Even after what she did? Missing someone is not the same as trusting them. Love does not disappear simply because it becomes unsafe. Will you ever forgive her? I do not know. Forgiveness is not a door someone can demand you open because they are tired of standing outside. It may come. It may not. What matters is that I no longer organize my life around the question. He nodded as though storing the answer for later. After he went to bed, I remained on the porch listening to the irrigation system click on. The farm was quiet but no longer empty. Ray's lights glowed across the pasture. Chamomile grew along the south fence. The repaired barn roof held against the wind. I had once believed winning meant keeping the property and watching the guilty people taken away. That was only the visible part. The harder victory was learning to live without becoming suspicious of every cup, every phone call, and every person who said they loved me. Trust at 72 is not easily replaced. It is a form of wealth accumulated through ordinary mornings, shared meals, and the belief that the person across the table is who you think they are. Once that wealth is stolen, no judgment can repay it in full. But a life can continue without pretending the loss did not happen. I still make chamomile tea in the evening. I still use the blue mug. I drink it slowly in the workshop while cedar shavings collect beneath the bench and the orange trees stand beyond the window in 2 patient rows. The pale mark in the kitchen floor remains. I could sand it away, but I have chosen not to. It reminds me that Eleanor stopped. It also reminds me that she waited too long. Both truths belong there. The farm is legally mine, but I no longer think of ownership as the most important fact. The important fact is that I can wake, choose my own day, open my own door, and decide who enters. I can protect what I earned without apologizing for surviving long enough to enjoy it. If there is a lesson in my family's betrayal, it is not that love is false. Love was present in that house. Eleanor loved Brandon. Brandon claimed to love his child. Melissa believed she was protecting the family. I loved all of them. Love without boundaries became permission. Fear turned permission into conspiracy. Money gave the conspiracy a schedule. So protect your future before desperation enters the room. Read every document. Keep independent records. Do not hand one relative complete control simply because trust once felt permanent. Ask questions while you are healthy enough to dislike the answers. Kindness is not the same as surrender, and refusing exploitation is not cruelty. Most of all, do not confuse a person's love for you with their right to decide that your life has lasted long enough. I was 72. I had lived a good life. That did not mean I was finished. Outside my workshop, the orange trees keep growing. Each season brings fruit, frost, pruning, and another chance to care for what remains. Machines fail when damaged parts are ignored. Families fail when truth is treated as less important than keeping everyone comfortable. I could not repair the family I had. I could only stop the machine they had built around me, protect the life still in front of me, and refuse to let betrayal write the final line. The forgotten camera gave me evidence. The trust gave me protection. The law gave me time. What I built afterward gave me my life back. One autumn afternoon, 4 years after the arrests, Eleanor came to the farm for the first time since she left. She did not arrive unannounced. Martin called 2 weeks earlier and said she wanted to return one item that belonged in the house. I agreed to meet her on the porch, not inside. She stepped from a small gray car carrying the eucalyptus wreath that had once hung on our front door. I had taken it down after her departure and placed it in a box of belongings Martin delivered to her. Time had faded the yellow ribbon, and several leaves had broken away. "I repaired what I could," she said. I looked at the wreath. Some things show the repair. They should. We stood facing the grove. She looked older, though perhaps I did too. Distance allows age to become visible all at once. "Brandon writes to me," she said. "He still explains. He wrote to me once." "I know." "Melissa?" "She is trying. Tyler keeps her honest." "That is too much work for a child." "He is not a child anymore. He should still not have to raise his mother." Eleanor nodded. She told me she had spent 3 years volunteering at a support center for families affected by financial abuse. At first, she believed helping others might balance what she had done. Eventually, she understood that service was not payment. It was simply work that needed doing. "I do not expect you to be proud of me," she said. "I am glad the work helps someone." That was all I could give truthfully. She placed the wreath on the porch bench. "I wanted you to decide whether it belongs here." I studied the dried leaves, the faded ribbon, and the places where new wire held the old shape together. "It does not belong on the door," I said. Her face tightened, but she accepted the answer. I carried it to the workshop and hung it above the cabinet where I had once locked the poison tea. Not as a symbol of reconciliation, and not as punishment. It belonged near the evidence of what our marriage had become, something once made with care, later damaged, then repaired without pretending it was new. When I returned, Eleanor was standing beside the chamomile patch. "You planted them," she said. "Yes." I wondered. They were seeds. They had not done anything wrong. For the first time that afternoon, she smiled. We did not embrace. I did not invite her inside. Before leaving, she touched the porch rail and said, "Goodbye, Walter." "Goodbye, Eleanor." Her car disappeared down the road. I went back to the workshop, made tea, and looked at the repaired wreath above the cabinet. Survival had never meant restoring everything. Sometimes it meant giving each damaged thing the only place where it could remain honestly. I finished my tea as evening settled over the grove. The trees held their places against the fading light. So did I, no longer waiting for anyone else to decide whether my remaining years were worth protecting too.